The public imagination fixates on the kinetic, the missile launch, the hypersonic glide vehicle. This is a profound analytic error. The financial and political cost of a peer-on-peer kinetic exchange is prohibitive. The optimal strategy is no longer a launch-on-warning protocol. It is an attack on the underlying logic of the system. The primary vector is not a missile. It is silence. According to CSIS, over 95% of all global data, including trillions in daily financial transactions, travels through a few hundred undersea fiber optic cables. These are the unsupervised arteries of the world economy. Severing a key node in the Strait of Malacca, or the Red Sea, is not a tactical military strike. It is a systemic kill switch. As demonstrated by Estonia's position on the front line of digital warfare, a nation's hyperconnectivity is its primary liability. The same applies to the orbit above. The targeted blinding of GPS or communication satellites creates the blind Leviathan, a superpower with unmatched kinetic force that cannot navigate, communicate, or target. An aircraft carrier battle group, stripped of its data link, reverts to being a 100,000-ton iron liability. Its power is nullified not by an explosion, but by the absence of a signal. This is the ultimate asymmetric leverage. This attack vector inverts the calculus of conflict. A weaker state, facing conventional defeat, is now mathematically incentivized to trigger a global solvency crisis as its opening move. The goal is not to win the battle, but to make the cost of the system's continuation unbearable for the opponent. This is the new policy shock that analysts at RUSI warn will define market risk for the coming decade. The motive for this escalation is not conquest. It is solvency. When a state faces certain conventional defeat, its leadership confronts a terminal balance sheet problem. The kinetic cost of continuing a losing war, compounded by internal political decay, creates a domestic liability that guarantees regime collapse. CSIS analysis on the Russian Federation frames this with clinical precision. An unpopular war, fueled by unsustainable losses, ceases to be a geopolitical project and becomes a solvency crisis. Every soldier lost, every tank destroyed, depletes the political capital required for the leadership to remain in power. The math becomes zero-sum. This internal pressure forces a pivot. Weakness mandates a strategic reevaluation. If you cannot win symmetrically on the battlefield, you must change the battlefield itself. The only remaining path is to find an asymmetric vector that generates leverage exponentially greater than its cost. The target, therefore, is no longer the opponent's military, but their systemic stability. The new strategy is to weaponize the very interconnectedness that makes them a superpower. The goal is to export your own solvency crisis, transforming a localized military defeat into a contagious global market risk event. This escalation is not a last resort. It is the optimal, mathematically sound response to impending failure. By triggering a systemic cascade, the weaker state makes the cost of their local defeat unbearable for the entire global system, forcing the stronger power to choose between a Pyrrhic victory and a global solvency crisis. The entire economic model of conventional warfare is now obsolete. According to analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or ROSI, the kinetic cost to field a modern main battle tank is approximately $5 million. The cost to neutralize that asset is now a $500 commercial drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 asymmetric cost liability, and it has inverted the physics of power. This phenomenon is the democratization of violence, the mass distribution of sophisticated, lethal technologies previously monopolized by state actors. For a weaker state facing a superior force, this isn't a gamble, it's a mathematical certainty. The cost-benefit analysis makes asymmetric attack the primary, optimal strategy, transforming a defensive liability into a direct vector against an opponent's economic solvency. The battlefield is not where you think. While legacy media focuses on declared front lines, like those detailed by New Lines magazine in Estonia, The true staging grounds are a global network of designated gray zones. The U.S. State Department's own Level 4 Do Not Travel warnings are the blueprint. These are not travel advisories. They are a public-facing map of state failure and systemic vulnerability. According to CSIS analysis, these zones offer the perfect launchpad, plausible deniability for the sponsor state, and a low kinetic cost for entry. These regions function as proxy laboratories. The objective is not territorial gain within them, but to use their instability as cover for a launch-on-warning protocol. A weaker state can leverage a non-state actor within one of these zones to execute a high-impact, low-attribution strike on a critical economic node. Think less about a tank invasion and more about severing a subsea data cable, contaminating a strategic port, or disrupting a key commodity flow. The goal is to weaponize an opponent's reliance on the global system. This asymmetric action transforms a local conflict into a global solvency crisis. The intended result is a systemic shock, modeled on the financial contagion seen when minor policy shifts cause global costs to spike, as documented when U.S. policy created worldwide uncertainty for wind power investors. The math is irrefutable. It is now cheaper to trigger a cascading failure in your adversary's interconnected economy than it is to defeat their military. The gray zone is simply where the equation is solved. The launch-on-warning protocol is not an emotional decision. It is a mathematical failsafe designed to guarantee a retaliatory strike. The protocol dictates that once early warning systems, satellites and ground radar, confirm an inbound strategic assault, a nation must launch its own arsenal before its assets are neutralized. The entire logic is predicated on the integrity of that warning data. This is where the calculus inverts. CSIS analysts have modeled the critical vulnerability, the warning system itself. It is a digital network and therefore a viable attack vector. An asymmetric cyber attack does not need to kinetically strike a single silo. It only needs to blind the radar, sever the data link, and create a black hole where there was once certainty. This triggers the fog of digital war. The commander in the bunker sees only a void. The radar is down. The satellite feed is gone. The protocol does not have a contingency for maybe. It has a contingency for a decapitation attempt, and a sudden total loss of sensors is a primary indicator of such an attack. The commander is now forced to choose. Wait for confirmation that may never come, risking the complete neutralization of their retaliatory capacity, or execute the launch protocol based on the evidence of a blinding attack. As RUSI reports confirm, the fear of being disarmed forces the launch. The aggressor expends zero kinetic cost, yet leverages the defender's own systemic protocol to initiate a global solvency event. The launch key is turned not by a missile, but by an algorithm. The era of the policy shock is concluding. The era of the policy test has begun. Analysts at CSIS confirm that state actors are no longer merely assessing vulnerabilities. They are actively testing response protocols. The objective is not kinetic destruction, but the controlled paralysis of a critical economic node to gauge the cascading effects on global solvency. Estonia represents the designated front line in this new Cold War. Its hyper-digitized infrastructure, once a strategic asset, is now a systemic liability. It is the optimal theater for a beta test of a new weapon class, an attribution-impossible cyber-physical attack designed to simulate a force majeure event. The calibration shot will not be a missile. It will be a data blackout. Within the next 12 months, expect a 72-hour, system-wide logistics paralysis at a primary Baltic Sea port. Crane operations, container tracking, and customs clearance will simultaneously fail. No data will be stolen, merely rendered inaccessible. The event will be attributed to a cascading software update failure. NATO will be unable to trigger a kinetic response. The markets will price the glitch, but the signal will have been received. The financial and logistical architecture of the West can be turned off at will. The cost of capital for all infrastructure will rise systemically, achieving a strategic economic victory with zero kinetic cost.